Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's CIRT-BS Cybersecurity Awareness Month webinar and Q&A. It's been about 2 years since we last had a webinar, so we thought it would be a good time to reintroduce ourselves and give you updates on what's been going on. We've got a packed schedule in store for you, so we'll get started promptly. But first, I am going to issue a prompt just to find out where everyone, what industries everyone is in. Okay. All right, so everyone should have received a prompt. We'd love to know what island or country you're representing today. Okay, so this Cybersecurity Awareness Month's theme was Secure Our World. And it promoted awareness and practical strategies that us as individuals, us as business owners and employees and communities can adopt to protect ourselves from cyber threats. This month, we actually covered 4 different areas of cybersecurity, and we'll go over those. So the first one we talked about was using strong passwords. That was week 1. The important things are to make them long, make sure they're complex, using different characters and different types of capitalization. And we're suggesting no less than 16 characters. In week 2, we talked about the importance of having multi-factor authentication, especially for your email accounts that have financial information tied to them. And that goes beyond your bank accounts. That also includes accounts you may shop online with. And finally, any accounts with personal info. Immediately, I think of social media accounts under that category. And then during the 3rd week, we covered phishing attacks and how to recognize them. And believe it or not, this is one of the number one issues we see at the CIRT. People are falling for phishing emails. And so we can't stress this enough. We gave you 5 things to look out for, which include a message tone that feels urgent or makes you feel scared, a sender email address where the domain doesn't match the company it's coming from, or there may be misspellings in that domain name, and then receiving an unexpected email, an unexpected text, an unexpected call. And I know here in the Bahamas, we see that a lot. Most recently, we've seen text messages that are basically saying that there's a package that needs to be delivered, but they need your credit card details to complete the delivery. And, while for some people it's obvious that this is a scam, many of us are still falling victim to it. Just ask anyone that works at the post office and they'll tell you that people come in all the time looking for packages that they didn't necessarily order. And then the 4th thing is request for personal info. So you should think twice or even 3 times before you give out your personal information to a company. And then the most blatant of them all tend to be misspelled words, bad grammar, and strange URLs that you can't pronounce. Our 4th topic this month, in the final week, was the importance of keeping your software updated. No more hitting remind me later, do it now. Update your software now. There are security vulnerabilities that are being fixed all the time, so it's important to have your software updated so that you aren't susceptible to different threats. One example we shared was where a teenager discovered a bug with Apple where they could spy on someone they were FaceTiming without the person ever answering. When Apple released a fix for this, the people who updated were able to benefit from this fix. and the others weren't. So don't undermine the importance of keeping your software updated and your hardware upgraded as well. So those are some of the things we talked about this month. Of course, if you want to receive these kinds of notifications when we release them or our articles, feel free to follow us on social media or join our mailing list. So at this time, I'll ask everyone from the CERT team to come on camera, introduce themselves, and tell us about what their favorite part about the CERT is. So we'll start with Militia. Militia, please introduce yourself and tell us your favorite part about cybersecurity.
Good morning. My name is Militia Ellis, and I'm one of the CERT analysts responsible for assisting with investigating cyber incidents. And this could range from research, analysis of evidence, logs, assisting in communication and advisories, as well as, in some cases, coordinating stakeholders and IR teams where the incident might be more, involved. I'm also responsible for and working along on a stakeholders engagement project where we invite and engage with our stakeholders just to introduce you to the CERT, who we are, why we're here, and what are some of the benefits and services that we provide. We want to pretty much build a trust relationship, identifying the needs of the organization and how we could assist. And also to help us to disseminate critical information that may affect the organization. In this, we want to foster that information sharing, collaboration, and just working together to ensure that we have a strong cybersecurity posture. A few of you I may have already engaged with, and I'm excited to engage with many of you and look forward to meeting some of you. My favorite part of working with the CERT is, you learn the broad aspects of cybersecurity. I'm not just the intricate part, but even working on international level, we got to engage. And because we are part of a few organizations, international organizations, our partners, we get to actually see it on a broader level. And so that's, for me, that is what I think I enjoy the most, being the exposure to the international partners.
Thank you so much, Militia. And then we'll go on with Erica.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Erica Popol. I am the Policy and Compliance Analyst here at the National CERT. And it is my job to not just be a bully and make sure everybody do what they're supposed to do, but to help create policies that will help us to do our job better and in a more consistent manner so that we can serve you better.
Thank you, Erica. And next, Gerard.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gerard Thompson. I'm the Senior CERT Analyst for the National Computer Incident Response Team of the Bahamas. And our CERT mission is to support our agencies in response to cybersecurity incidents. We focus on identifying threats, coordinating response, and sharing vital information to our network. My favorite part of my role is to lead our team in response quickly and help straighten our defenses. So we are not just here just to handle issues that comes up. We also here to work to prevent future incidents by building proactive strategies to prevent our national digital assets. So I'm looking forward to looking forward to our decisions of what we are doing today with you, and hope that our future cybersecurity will better our country. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerard. And then finally, the director of the CERT and recent recipient of the ISC2 Senior Professional Award, Demetria McKinney, our director, who many of you are familiar with already.
Thank you all. Well, my name is Demetria McKinney, and I am the director of the National CERT. I'm extremely excited and beyond happy to have all of you present today. What's the most favorite part of my job? I think it's working with all of you, building a national program that supports cybersecurity, that will improve the country's cybersecurity posture, that would allow us to build shared resilience. I am passionate about working with this fine team that you're seeing here today. And I think in my presentation, you'll see a lot of what we're doing. So I won't preempt my presentation here today, but I'm happy to work with my team. I'm happy to support my country, and I'm happy to build shared resilience working with all of you.
Thank you so much, Demetria. And I'm Megan Jack. I am the Security Awareness Program Strategist at the CIRT. So my role involves creating security awareness programs and doing outreach on behalf of CIRT-BS. I also take on a bit of a communications role here as well. So we'll get started. We have a few items on the agenda. First, Demetria will come back and tell us a bit about, give us some updates on the CIRT, what's been happening over the last year or two. We officially launched in December of last year, so there's been a lot of exciting things happening here. She'll also give us an update on the national cybersecurity strategy. And then we'll have a moment for Q&A with Demetria. And then following that, we'll have an exciting presentation, or an interview session rather, with Mark Aruda, who is the VP of Solutions at Cloud Carib. So I will let Demetria take it away. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to go. Good morning again. I am presenting to you on building a cyber reef. And I'm happy that I have this opportunity because I recently gave this presentation in Jersey, the Channel Islands, about the Bahamas' cyber reef. The first question I'm hoping you're thinking about when you hear cyber reef is that you're asking me, Demetria, what is a cyber reef? I'm excited to talk to you about this, so let's dive in. I have a really short agenda here for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about our national mandate and our objectives. I'm going to take you back to the creation of the National CIRT and discuss the National Cybersecurity Strategy. And then we'll talk about some of our challenges. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with what's next, what's important. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm imagining that based on all of you here, some of you may already know about the CIRT, that's why you're attending this webinar, but some of you may be new to us, and I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language and I'm taking you on this journey with us so that I'm catching you up on what we've done, what are some of the challenges that we're working on now, our key objectives, and then we'll move into answering some questions. To remind you, why did we start this CIRT? Why is the CIRT important to you? So the establishment of the National CIRT was born out of the National Digital Transformation to Strengthen Competitiveness project. And this project has three key components. The first is streamlining government procedures. And this is basically what you're seeing with My Gateway. E-government, there's an e-government portal that I hope you all are using to request government services. The second is increasing ICT use, and out of this component, the CIRT was born. And the third is to increase government transparency. And I think you probably have heard things like Freedom of Information Act, and there are many projects that are a part of this overall digital transformation project. However, I'm going to focus on just the CIRT and the national strategy. I've been warned by my team many times this morning that I should not go over time. And if you know me and if you've heard me speak before, I'm passionate about this work, and it's very likely that I will take more time, but I promise Megan that I won't. What are our mandates? Why are we here, and how did we get started? So we have three. The first one was to assess the cybersecurity posture of the country. And we did that using three assessments. We did a CIRT readiness assessment, and it really looked at the feasibility of the country to establish the CIRT. We also did a national cybersecurity capacity maturity assessment. This assessment informed us on what works, what doesn't work, but it also looked at the capacity of cybersecurity over 5 domains. Now, when we looked at this, what we find that for all 5 of those domains, we were at either startup, meaning there's little to no evidence of a cybersecurity protocol existing, or ad hoc, meaning that we had some process, we did it some of the times, but it was not a repeatable process. And then finally, what we did was a national cybersecurity strategy development assessment. Some of you on the call would have engaged with me and the team while we were conducting these assessments, but all of these assessments helped to inform the creation and development of the national cybersecurity strategy. So the second mandate, you see it here, is to develop this strategy. And we did this in 2022. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. And this strategy lays out 15 key cybersecurity objectives that we want to implement in the country to build cybersecurity resilience and improve the country's cybersecurity posture. And finally, establishing of the national CIRT. One of the things I like to say about the CIRT is that we established the CIRT as the cybersecurity authority in the country, and the CIRT has more than the traditional role of cybersecurity incident response and coordinating those efforts. It also has the responsibility of executing the national cybersecurity strategy. So we've worked with all of you, and during those assessment phases, we worked with law enforcement, international organizations, government ministries, academia, law and defense, and our criminal justice. We also worked with technical organizations and critical information agencies. The reason why this is important, that we wanted to make sure that we had a cross-section of information from all of you, and that we were constantly engaging you. You can imagine that while most of you or some of you don't yet or haven't yet engaged with the CIRT, we didn't want us to appear one day and say, hi, we're CIRT, we're here. So the purpose here is so that we're building trust with you, we're taking you on the journey, we're getting your input, we're understanding the value that we need to provide to you. I went over this already, so I won't belabor this point further. So let's get into the strategy. I mentioned that this strategy has 15 key objectives. And I also mentioned that the strategy was developed in 2022. But let's talk about what we've done with the National Cybersecurity Strategy since then, and what can you look to see from the strategy. So the first thing I want to share is that this strategy was semi-recently approved in March of 2024, this year, and we're excited to have it. Now, I know you're thinking it was developed in 2022, only approved in 2024. That is kind of standard in that we're working through the approval process, not procurement process yet. We're working through the approval process. Now that we have this strategy approved, we're moving into establishing a national cybersecurity strategic committee along with publishing the strategy. So you're going to see from us in the next month lots of public awareness and stakeholders engagement, including the one that you're on now, that's centered around the national strategy, educating you on the strategy, and also asking for your feedback on prioritization and an action plan and roadmap. So here's this beautiful document here. The strategy covers 5 strategic areas and 15 key objectives. The first is my favorite, and obviously you'll see why. The first objective is the CIRT is a national cybersecurity authority with responsibility for executing the national cybersecurity strategy. I mentioned this earlier. This cybersecurity governance framework also covers our high-level interagency coordination and how we engage. It also covers positioning of the national CIRT. That legal framework gives us our authority to do our job. It also defines things like our services, our constituents, who we serve, how we serve, and then finally, how we engage with international organizations. The second strategic objective speaks to incident response, and this is really the work of the CIRT. It lays out our fundamental CIRT services, communication, how we coordinate with you, our stakeholders and constituents, and incident coordination, escalation, and managing crisis. So last week, I was engaged with the Defense Force, where we had lots of conversations about building national resilience and managing cybersecurity crisis. Where does this sit? Who should you call? Who will coordinate this? Who would lead this? Well, this is captured in our national strategy, and we're building those frameworks out now. The third strategic area looks at protecting critical information infrastructure. So if you're wondering, what is a critical information infrastructure agency? It is those essential services of a country that, if disrupted, will cause major disruption in the country. So that's your financial services, your energy, your food supplies, maritime, those things that are key to the operations of the country. And as you can appreciate, it's our job to protect those services. The area of mapping critical information infrastructure. One gap that we recognize in knowing our national assessment was that the Bahamas, we have the opportunity of identifying in legislation what's critical to us. Who do we consider to be critical information infrastructure? Because currently, up to this date, that has not happened. So this strategy certainly presents opportunity to introduce new things. And then for our fourth strategic area, it covers cybersecurity awareness and skills. This area is important to me, and it's my favorite because it looks at how do we build capacity in the country. One of the things that we also saw when we were doing our assessments is how small the talent pool is in the Bahamas when we consider cybersecurity and cybersecurity capabilities and competencies. We are currently relying on many services outside of the Bahamas. So the objective 10 speaks to societal cybersecurity awareness. How does the digital citizens of the Bahamas respond to cyber events? Do they understand basic cyber hygiene and their ability to appropriately respond when presented with a cyber risk? The objective 11 speaks to a skilled workforce, and I mentioned this already. Improving capacity in the country, making sure that we are building competencies so that we can do the job of protecting our country and our digital citizens. And the objective 12 of the strategic area speaks to education and awareness at all levels. And this is at K level, right up to professional level. So we want everybody, including policymakers, decision makers. We want to make sure that we have high schoolers, primary school, within our professional jobs, colleges. The cybersecurity is evolving, and it's an intricate part of our educational system. And finally, and certainly not least, most important is law enforcement and defense. This looks at developing cybersecurity instrument to support persecution and attribution of cybercrime and cyber-enabled crime. It also looks at building capacity in law enforcement and the judiciary system. And then ultimately, it looks at how we will cooperate with law enforcement. I heard Militia mention building trust. a lot of this work that we have to do requires us working together. If you'll hear me say shared resilience many, many times throughout this presentation, because the goal here is that this work and the implementation of this strategy isn't that only of the CIRT, this is our shared work to implement, but also it is our continued shared work to build resilience within the country. So let's talk about the CIRT-BS. So I talked a little bit about the strategy. You'll get time to ask me questions about what we're doing next and how you can be involved and engage with the strategy. But let's dive into what is the CIRT, what do we do, how we can help you, and information that we want from you. I mentioned that the Bahamas CIRT-BS is a focal point for cybersecurity response coordination. And that means that we offer services to define constituents. But because we are the national CIRT, our service offerings are both to the public sector and the private sector. And that service looks at both proactive and reactive services. So this is a broad definition of a CIRT, but I won't belabor that, but I think we all have gone over this topic quite a bit. So how are we building shared resilience? Why is it important for you to engage with the CIRT? And what we recognize, it's the CIRT needs to share with you in order for us to build shared resilience. One is building a knowledge base, and that is sharing knowledge between you, the CIRT, as well as sharing knowledge with other members of your stakeholder group or the constituents. Secondly, building trust and cybersecurity culture. I'm going to pause here because I wanted to focus on what is a cybersecurity culture. It's the ability of having cybersecurity a part of our daily lives, that we are understanding the cybersecurity risks as a collective, and then we understand the response to cybersecurity risk as a collective. That we know, I won't go as far as to say we're excited about managing cybersecurity, but certainly we're not afraid, or we're not passing on that responsibility to IT or the CIRT, that everybody is playing a part. So when we talk about cybersecurity being everybody's business, this is it. This is where we have a culture of it. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of our conversation. It's a part of our business. We have policies around it. And you're just as excited about cybersecurity as I am. The other one is it's supporting development and national cybersecurity programs. What you saw in the National Cybersecurity Strategy will bond several programs centered around building cybersecurity. So we will look at legislation, we will look at changing some curriculum, if possible, working with the Ministry of Education for those things. The CIRT in itself is essentially a cybersecurity program. And those are making sure that we support the development of them so that they're here with us, we're maturing them, and we're able to have cybersecurity resilience through that. And then finally, enable national incident response and management capabilities. This is, in order to have national incident response, it requires, again, more than just the CIRT. It requires law enforcement. It requires a coordinated effort. It requires communication and support. And so this speaks to how do we support one another in order to build this shared resilience. Quickly, we will discuss the vision and the mission of the CIRT. Our vision is to be a trusted leader in cybersecurity incident response, creating a robust, secure, and resilient cyberspace through global collaboration. Our mission is to improve the country's cybersecurity posture, and I've said this before, through proactive identification and management of cyber risks, collaborative cybersecurity information sharing, and education, while protecting the constitutional rights of all Bahamian residents. We've already gone and you've met my team, and they are all happy to work with you. So one of the things Melissa mentioned is stakeholder engagement. My hope is that at the end of this, you'll be asking us, how do I sign on to your newsletter? engaging with our website, and also signing up for stakeholder engagement, where we will present the CERT to you along with a short tour. So let's talk about the small CERT that we are now and developing to be, and then how we offer services to our constituents. As you can appreciate, because we would have started in January of this year, we're still growing, we're still maturing, and we recognize that we need a phased approach on how we will engage with our constituents. So primarily, we're starting with government and government agencies. And then second, we're looking at critical information infrastructure agencies. And then finally, we're looking at private sector agencies and the general public. However, our engagement includes everybody now, everyone. We work with the government now. Our goal is to understand specific needs that the government have, how we can support those needs of the government, how we can create proactive cybersecurity services around the government. Critical infrastructure, however, we're currently working on engaging them as well so that we know who they are. We'll talk a little bit about information we want to have from all of our constituents, but when it comes to critical infrastructure, we appreciate that there has to be standards and guidelines around how they operate and then how they integrate cybersecurity within their agencies. And the CERT wants to support those agencies with that. Our service-based approach. So I mentioned that we offer 5 core services, but currently to date, we're focusing on 3. 3 includes knowledge transfer, education, and awareness. That's why you're here. We're talking about the CERT, we're making you aware of our programs, we're talking about the strategy. Throughout the entire month, we were giving you awareness tips on cybersecurity hygiene, but this also includes things like cybersecurity exercise. So we have, over the last few years, conducted a cybersecurity conference where we've had speakers, we've invited you, and also last year, we conducted a cybersecurity drill, kind of going over a simulated exercise on if we were to have an incident, how we would respond. Similarly, next year, we'll be conducting things like that. You can expect to see more training coming from the CERT so that you are aware that we're building that capacity and you know, just as a normal digital citizen, how to respond to cyber risk. The second, and I dare say most important, our bread and butter, is incident response. So currently, we are drafting legislation that will support how the CERT offers services, its mandate, its authority. I mentioned this already. But while we're in that space and we don't have the legislation yet, we've identified ways that we can support our constituents and add value. So one is incident reporting. This is important to us because we need to know the incidents that are happening so that we can support you. You can do this by going on our website. We have a very simple form where you can report an incident, big or small. We will engage with you and ask you how we can support you, and then offer those services that we can. The other one is incident analysis. This is when you have an incident and you really can't figure out root cause. We assist you through advisory on how to mitigate, but then we help you analyze the incident, determining root cause, providing you with a report that you can take to your leadership. And finally, incident coordination. And this includes all the things that Melissa mentioned. We coordinate people, process, and technology across board so that we can respond proactively and timely to the incident. That involves sometimes including law enforcement as a part of the incident response team. Then vulnerability management, discovery and disclosure. So we currently send out advisories to you, our constituents, on vulnerabilities. You can have a snapshot of that if you visit our website, and you will see previous advisories that we've sent out. One of the reasons that this is very important to me is because we need information from you. So we have tons of threat intelligence data that comes from our international organizations that we're a part of. And what's happening now is that we are learning our constituents. We see this information, we see IP addresses, but we don't always know who they belong to. So what our goal is to provide timely, relevant, and scalable advisories to you, as well as those general advisory that impacts most of you. And then, of course, vulnerability disclosure. This is when you have defined, through your research or through engaging with your technology, you find some type of vulnerability and you want to contact the vendor. We can coordinate that for you. Cybersecurity strategic goals for this year. The first is drafting our cybersecurity legislation that will support the establishment of the CIRT and our mandate that I mentioned before. Our operational maturity, we're new and we're constantly maturing and developing. Stakeholder engagement that we mentioned already, we're inviting you to build trust, to share information with us so that we can better serve you. Public awareness, this is why you're here, not only on the CIRT so that you know who we are and how to engage with us, but also on the national strategy and its implementation, training and capacity, hosting training events to support our constituents, but also to support our internal cybersecurity team. And then finally, and most important to me, is the implementation of the national cybersecurity strategy. Those are our major objectives for 2024, and they will spill over to 2025 as well. So let's talk about Cyber Reef. I mentioned building a Cyber Reef. So the team came up with Cyber Reef because we're from the Bahamas and we thought it was catchy. Most times what you will see is Cyber Shield. But we thought, being from the Bahamas, Cyber Reef was the way to go. So if you think about a reef, what does a reef do? So it's a water breaker. It provides source of food for marine life. It's a place where marine life hang out. It provides protection. And so centered on those concepts, we are offering a Cyber Reef product to you, our constituents. So what's included in this? Once you sign on to be a part of our Cyber Reef program, these are some of the things you can expect from us. We'll start off with advanced breach detection, and that's centered on deploying a honeypot. So a honeypot is I'll say sweet looking file or network that mimics a real network that attracts attackers to it. It allows us to be able to see the profile of attackers, and that will provide intelligence that will provide you with some advanced breach detection in simple definitions. We'll obviously providing our advisory service that we provide now, active scanning, access to global intelligence. And one thing that's not mentioned here is kind of specialized training. We're offering this to you. We're building out this program. We love the idea of having more of you on board and to be a part of our Cyber Reef program. So you'll be hearing a lot more from us. You'll be hearing us use the term Cyber Reef, and I hope you use the term Cyber Reef because this is the type of collaboration that we're hoping to have with all of you. I'm wrapping up to the end now. Some of the key challenges that we are currently working through at the CIRT is one, legislation and legal instrument to support cybercrime, to support the establishment of the CIRT. I mentioned that we have a draft legislation that will soon be available for public consultation. We'll work with you. You'll be seeing publication and awareness on that so that we are constantly hearing from you. The goal here for me is that we provide services to you. And so we need to hear from you and understand from you what's best, how best to serve you. The other is resources, talent, technical resources, budget. Everyone has resource constraints and the CIRT is no different. But one of the things that I think we can address now and in the future is talent. Education is important to us progressing the objectives of the CIRT as well as the objectives of the strategy. And then insufficient education and awareness, mainly situational awareness. It's important that we can share with you, our decision makers, our leaders on what's the current state of the Bahamas, and so that you know what's going on. So what are some of the lessons learned? And then we'll move into questions. We're always considering culture. So I'm a Bahamian. I'm proud to do this work in my country, but I'm always thinking about how do I get my people on board? How do I build trust with them? How do I make sure that I'm engaging them appropriately and adding value? So we're constantly considering this throughout the development of our program, hearing from you so that we can tailor the program to suit you. We have focused a lot of work on building our international relationships with our CIRT networks. And this is critical because as a small CIRT, a part of a small island state, what we recognize is that we're building. We're not 100% there, so we need help. But the work of cybersecurity is one where you have to have your tribe. Cybersecurity itself is a borderless issue, and being able to engage with CIRTs all over the world has empowered us. We know that we're not standing alone. We know that if there's anything that we see, we have partners throughout the world that we can engage that will help us. And that certainly provides a level of confidence when we're offering service. Engaging with stakeholders, we've tried and continue to try multiple ways on how we will engage with you. And we look forward to you reaching out to us in ways and providing ways on how we can help you. We've set out clear objectives on what we intend to do this year, and you'll hear our objectives next year. Some of them will be repeat. And the strategy certainly lists out where the CIRT is going as the cybersecurity authority of the country. Developing our own incident response and maturing those processes, as well as building capacity internally and throughout our stakeholders. Allocation of resources, because as we mentioned, they are restrictive. No one has all the resources they need. And finally, making sure that we're here to educate the public. I'm going to say one short thing before I end my presentation, because that certainly is the last slide. We mentioned legislation, what's next, building capacity, technology and services capacity. But coming up very shortly, we are establishing the National Cybersecurity Committee, and we'll be reaching out to many of you who have been a part of the CIRT's tribe to participate in either the strategic committee or its working group or its task force group, because we can't do this without you. The other thing is the CIRT has planned a workshop centered around the National Cybersecurity Strategy that is scheduled to be hosted the first week of December, and that's happening the 3rd through the 5th, so you can look out for information on that as well. With that, I'm going to say thank you so much for listening, and I'm sure you'll have questions in the question and answer session.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sumitra. I'll open to the floor to any questions. In the meantime, while people are getting their questions together, I do have one that came in earlier. So can you give a quick synopsis on how you develop a national cybersecurity strategy, and how does a country that may not have a CIRT, how would they decide which organization will drive that strategy?
Drive the strategy. So usually that happens through mandate. This is higher than the level of the CIRT. So your leaders determine positioning of the CIRT, where the strategy should be housed, and how the strategy should be implemented. So that's the formal answer, really. But if we're talking about practically how that works, this happens because, again, if you have one agency like we do in the Bahamas for cybersecurity, then most times that is the agency that will develop the strategy, that will implement the CERT, and that will implement obviously the strategy. So we are not unique. What I found that in the English-speaking Caribbean, most time what you find is that the CERT serves as the cybersecurity authority and also as the largest cybersecurity agency with responsibility for implementing the national cybersecurity strategy.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I also have a question in the chat. Could there be a database of commonly used applications used by Bahamian businesses that CERT can keep them aware of having updated in case of vulnerabilities or worse, a 0-day?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
Sure. So it sounds like this person is asking for whether or not we can have a database of commonly used applications that our constituents might use, so that if there's a vulnerability or a 0-day, we can keep our constituents updated on that.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's essentially what we're doing here as a part of our stakeholder engagement. When we reach out to you and we engage with you, some of the things we ask you is tell us your IP range. Tell us what you're using in your shop. Also, when we engage with vendors, we want to know, what are you selling? We want to have an appreciation for the ecosystem of our country. So what that does for us, just as you're saying, it allows us to provide relevant advisories to you. We worry about information overload or fatigue. You get blasts and blasts of advisories, and after a while, you won't be sensitive to them. So the goal here is to provide relevant, timely advisories to you that's centered on products and technology that you have within your organization.
Okay, thank you. Someone wants to know how they can sign up for the Cyber Reef program. So I'm going to go ahead and send out another prompt, and you can feel free to request a one-on-one. Is there anything you want to add to that, Sumitra?
You've answered it. You request a one-on-one stakeholder engagement with us, and we will walk you through who we are, the information we request. We have a survey, the information we want from you, how we'll use that information. We'll sign an NDA with you. And then obviously we'll move into understanding what you want. We'll tell you about our Cyber Reef program, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Someone else is asking, how long will the legislation take to pass, and who exactly will draft the legislation?
So the first part of that question, I'm hopeful that it doesn't take a long time, right? Because that certainly helps position the CERT and give the CERT its authority to do its job. But in terms of who has drafted the legislation, this is being done in partnership with DTU, the Digital Transformation Unit, and the CERT. So we have legal specialists there. Shout out to Latoya Green, who is leading that. And then ultimately we'll take it through its paces for approval and consultation and the likes.
Okay. I also see that we have a participant with their hand raised, Mr. Bethel, so I'll allow you to speak. And if you still have that question, you can go ahead and ask. Okay, perhaps that was a mistake. So I'll move on. Will there be similar stakeholder engagements on the draft legislation?
Yes. So that'll be a part of our public consultation phase. So right now we have drafted this document, and then it goes through a level of approval, then it has some consultation, and then kind of goes, there's all these steps that we go through. Yes. So the short answer is we will be advising you. We certainly need to hear from you on the legislation. So we're going to have you, it's going to be public once we're going through the consultation phase. You're going to have the opportunity to ask us questions, to provide input to the legislation to help us make sure that it's suitable for us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any initiatives geared around helping professionals to connect and grow in the talent pool?
Yes, there are. Well, they will be in the near future. So one of the things you mentioned, you would have seen on my list of objectives for 2024 is that building capacity and collaboration. And we recognize that currently we don't have a vibrant cybersecurity professional organization. The CERT recognizes the need for that, and we will support establishing that. I'm going to put a shameless plug out here. All of you who are on the call who identify as cybersecurity, IT security, cyber risk professional and want to be a part of that, please send us some information with your email so that when we send out the initial invite, we can invite you, we can have this conversation, we can talk about how we want to shape that organization to better serve us.
Thank you. And how do individuals go about joining the task force? I imagine it might be a similar process.
Yes, so the task force hasn't been established yet, but we will have requests for nominations. First, we start off with the strategic committee, and then we have working group, and then we have task force. We recognize that there are some key people that needs to be in the task force. Okay, so we know law enforcement, we know some critical infrastructure layer, ISPs, the CERT obviously needs to be, the government needs to be. And then we need a body of like from academics and technology. So we'll have an opportunity to be nominated or to request being a part of this task force. It has not happened yet. This is part of the work that we are doing in November in preparation for this workshop that we're having in December. Some things that you will see happening in November is the actual launch of the strategy. We'll have it on our website. You'll have an opportunity to read it, not just the points. So that's something that you can look forward to.
Thank you. And in your experience, how attuned are you finding the Bahamian public is to cybersecurity? With all of the attacks that we've had or are continuing to have, where are we on the awareness spectrum?
That's a great question, and I'm happy to answer it. So I'll start off by talking about what we learned from the CMM, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. So what we saw is that as a country, based on the collective information we gathered, is that we are somewhere between startup and ad hoc when it comes to education and awareness. And that happens because we don't have sufficient mechanisms in place to close those gaps. And so once we start working on them, so we have some people, we obviously have some professional, we have some organizations where cybersecurity is an intricate part of their organization, but that's not a holistic thing. So once we start to create mechanisms designed to closing those gaps, like the professional organization, making sure that we are providing cybersecurity hygiene and awareness to the general public at the service doing now, and other organizations also, they're doing that. You see the central bank, you see your ISPs doing Rev. So once we start to see more of that, what will happen is that people will be empowered and know how to respond to cyber risk. They'll also be asking, similar to how you request security for physical security, you'll recognize that cybersecurity is equally important. I hope that answers the question by saying that we're still immature and we're working on being better.
Thank you. Okay, so aside from the strategy, how else does legal fit into our CERT? Do we have cybersecurity lawyers on staff? Is that something we're looking to add to our staff?
Well, we're still a small team and we don't have a cybersecurity legal professional on the team per se. We are also still a part of the project executing team of the digital transformation project, of which we have legal professionals there. So we do have access to our legal professionals and we've been working with them. We do recognize the need though to have, as we mature, to have a legal professional a part of the search team. I'm not hearing you. I think you're muted, Megan.
Thank you. Is each government ministry's IT department a part of the cyber training, and are they aware of the legislation that's being presented?
My hope is that we will continue to do work around making them aware of the draft legislation once we are able to publicize it or publish it for public consultation. Currently, we work closely with the ICT, so they are aware. There are some government agencies that have are decentralized, so have a different IT department outside of the ICT. And the engagement project that we have now is designed to bring them into the fold, to make them aware of who we are, to build trust, to gather information, so that we're constantly sharing information. I can't say it enough. I'm not in the business of hoarding any information centered around cybersecurity for the country. It's our goal, our desire to make sure that you know what we know. You are informing us so that we are offering you better services.
Okay. And this looks like the final question. How often do we see cybersecurity incidents, and how severe are they generally?
We see them every day, actually. So we have several sources of how an incident can start. I won't say generate them. They're generated out of our threat intelligence source, so we can see that, right? And then also you can call us. You can call us and say, or you can go on the website and you can fill out a form and you inform us of an incident. And then sometimes we find out that there's an incident through a third party. So every day we have some level of exposure, awareness of an incident, and at different levels of severity, so you're aware.
Okay. Oh, one more question.
Sure.
Dorcas Bowler, National Library and Information Services. Would first like to thank you for a clear and comprehensive presentation, and all members of the CIRT. She would like to know, how could we collaborate more and be covered by cybersecurity in our public libraries?
Reach out to the CIRT. We'll be happy to talk to you. If you have a team, bring them by, sign up for our stakeholder engagement one-on-one, so we can talk to you about our services. We can tell you how to engage with us. I know I may have said this throughout the presentation, that the CIRT can't be everything to everyone, in its capacity, but we understand that we are the body. We are the current body that manages cybersecurity in the country, and we want to figure out how to support you better. So the best way is to reach out to us, and then we will set up these meetings, give you a tour, we'll talk to you. You have a better appreciation, more in depth than my presentation, and we can talk about what are some of your needs and concerns. But you always have access to our services.
Okay. And someone else is asking, how does CIRT feel confident in being able to address threats that emerge?
Yes, we're feeling confident, partly because I have a team of experts. Let me say that, right? But outside of that, we can't do this alone. I'll say this, large countries, first world countries, are dealing with threats every day. We are not immune nor exempt from having cyber incidents, just like anywhere else. Large corporations are also dealing with cybersecurity incidents. The way this works, and it works best, is when we are doing it as a collective. So some of the work that the CIRT has done already is that it went out and says, we know we're small, we know that we're building capacity in the country and internally to our CIRT. So we know we need to shore up our support. And so the CIRT-BS is a member of FIRST. FIRST is an organization that supports globally CIRTs and SOCs. And we are the first in the English-speaking Caribbean to be a part of that. We're also a part of CIRT Americas that's supported by OAS, Organization of American States. No, we are part of CIRT's network, designed for the very purpose of, if we're missing something, we can call on our network for support, and we are actively engaging with capacity building efforts. That is not to say we know everything today. No. What I'm saying is, if we don't know, we're going to work very hard to find out, and we will call on the support we need in order to do the job.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation, Demetrio. I am going to transition over now and invite Militia to come on stage and present our next speaker.
Okay. And I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Mr. Mark Arruda. Mr. Mark Arruda is the Vice President of Solutions at Cloud Carib Limited, one of the leading providers of sovereign cloud, cybersecurity, and digital transformation services in the Caribbean and Latin America. Mark is dedicated to transformative solutions for clients aiming to realize their visions and enhance organizational value through technology. With 20 years of global tech leadership across startups and multinational corporations, Mark focuses on driving Caribbean region transformation. Let's welcome Mr. Mark Arruda.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, Mark, how are you? How are you feeling today? Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. It was very informative to hear about what the Caribbean and what the Bahamas in specific is doing to combat cybersecurity. It is a global issue, but I think we're on the right path.
Okay. So I have a few questions for you, and
Sure.
we'd love to get your expert opinion. This segment is going to be geared toward businesses and business employees. So first off, many businesses and employees think that cybersecurity is just an IT problem. That's something that I hear all the time. Can you tell us why this mindset might be dangerous and how we can change it?
Sure. If you think of every employee of a company as a potential attack point for a malicious actor, a hacker, if you will, a phishing attempt recipient, we all play that role in terms of understanding why we would be an attack vector and how we can help the company in preventing that. So we think of security as antivirus on your laptop or a firewall, a password, all those good things. But all those things can be circumvented if I respond to an email that says, I just want an iPhone 16, and I click on a link within the organization's borders. And no one wants to be the recipient or the person responsible for that. And there are very simple things that you can do to circumvent that as an organization. One of the things we are big believers in is cybersecurity training for the organization to understand it can happen to anybody at any time. A very simple example, someone gets an email, I'm a new employee at the company, an email from the CEO says, I need you to go buy me some Amazon gift cards or some iTunes gift cards. And you want to be the good employee and be responsive to the CEO, and you run out and get those cards on the company account, of course, and proceed with giving him all that money, right through gift cards. So it doesn't need that, and that had really nothing to do with technology per se. It's a human being responding as a human being, and wanting to do what their boss tells them to do. Yeah. So we can train people to understand, and even have policies written to say, the CEO will never ask you to buy iTunes gift cards through an email, right, at 7 a.m. So those are things we can do to enforce the fact that we're all responsible for the security of our organization, and not just the IT team that's probably short-staffed and fighting for their lives, keeping things up and running on top of security.
Yeah. Okay. Do any other misconceptions that businesses may have when it comes to cybersecurity come in mind, perhaps in relation to employees and how their role in protecting the organization?
Of course, yeah. Just the way they communicate with themselves, with others, in terms of, you know, talking casually outside of the office about, let's say a security initiative or a problem that you're having in the company. Maybe you had a security breach or you're worried about something. Just those casual conversations we have out in the open that we don't think about maybe impacting the company. And also, I find sometimes customers or clients will say, well, no one would attack my company because no one cares about my data from, let's say, from a ransomware perspective. But the reality is the person that cares about their data is the business owner. And if they can't access that data, there is no business, right? So it doesn't need to be, well, I'm not a bank or I'm not a pharmaceutical company. I'm not a financial services company. I sell furniture. So nobody cares about my information except me. And that's the exact reason why you might be a victim, is because without that information, you can't operate a business. So that's why you're attacked. So I think complacency is our number one enemy, thinking that we're not ever going to be a victim. Nobody wants to be a victim. And we can obviously take steps to ensure that doesn't happen. But the mindset is very important.
Okay. And what would you say is the biggest threat in the cybersecurity realm to Bahamian organizations right now?
It's actually what I just touched upon, is thinking it won't happen to me. I'm not important. I'm not a multinational. I'm not a billion-dollar company. I'm just a small, medium-sized firm doing my thing. Or thinking, is so many things I need to do to secure my company. I don't know where to start. So I don't know how to begin. So I never do. It's that paralysis of analysis, right? Where do I start? So again, training is an easy thing. Things like, and I'm not here to, say Cloud Carib's the answer, but we can help in a lot of instances in terms of making things more affordable for a smaller company that maybe can't obviously afford to go hire a cybersecurity expert, a firewall expert, a ransomware expert, that kind of thing. So you can leverage the resources available to you within country. We are, for those that don't know, Cloud Carib is a Bahamian company. We are headquartered here in Nassau, and we have a team of cybersecurity experts as well as other expertise that is available 24/7, literally, for any needs someone might have. But I don't want to talk about that in terms of a sales pitch. It's just, the reality is there is help as needed. Just like CIRT is offering help and frameworks to strengthen the Bahamas as a whole. So and you could look to others. You could look to your peer network to say, hey, I'm facing this problem. How did you solve it? Because likely someone that has had the same issue that you're facing right now. So just reach out to your community, and we're part of that. But start somewhere versus just having the paralysis of not getting started at all. Simple things: antivirus on your laptop, again, training that's very cost effective. You can get into all the bells and whistles that you see big organizations have, but starting at the beginning essentially is how you get anything done.
Okay, those are some really good tips on how an organization that may not, have the budget could get started in protecting themselves. So I'm gonna pose some questions to the audience, or just a single question. I'm curious
Sure.
to know how they feel about their cybersecurity posture at their current organization. So I just issued a poll, and we'll revisit those results in a bit.
Great.
So I saw that Cloud Carib recently published an article on ransomware in the Caribbean, where threat actors are demanding that these companies pay a ransom. How often do you see local companies pay that ransom, and is that a good idea for them to do?
That's a great question. I think that and I hate to say it depends as an answer, but it does depend. And I'll say that, and I'll explain why I say it depends. If someone takes your data and ransomwares it, what does that mean? It means they took all of your information and they're holding it, at bay, and they want your money to release it. Now, how can you circumvent that? If I, as an organization, started out foundationally with a good footing, i.e., I have backups of my data, it seems very simple. But if you have a good backup of your data that you can restore, you can avoid paying that ransomware. Again, with a few caveats. If you just restore your data and the same vulnerabilities exist, you'll be ransomware again. Or if you don't have backups and pay pay the ransom, you can be sure that person will be back, because I was asked this question recently: what happens after I pay the ransomware? It's not very funny, but what they do is probably go on vacation and buy a lot of things with your money, and they'll come back next week to do it again, unless you fix the problem, right? So, if we can prevent this from happening with all the tools that we can have, great. But if it does happen, if you can restore from a backup, but also fix the problem, that means you need expertise to know, how did they ransomware me? What was my vulnerability? And it was something you talked about earlier that CERT's been highlighting in these sessions. One of them is updating your software. I didn't update my server software for 2 years, for 6 months, 8 months. And hackers don't necessarily sit there waiting for you to make a mistake. These are just bots and scripts running on the internet, waiting to detect a vulnerability. And it detects a vulnerability, it takes advantage of it, and it lets the person know, hey, I found something, and then they can explore more. So if you're patched, you'll just basically be overlooked, right? You'll be passed by. You won't be a target. If we don't fix that, then it's going to happen over and over and over again. So to answer your question in a very long way, I think having good backups prevents you from having to pay the ransomware. If you do pay it, make sure that it's not going to happen again, because you've addressed the underlying issue that caused it in the first place. And I just want to touch on the fact, something you said earlier about, companies and budgets and spending. We've all seen it. You could be $1 billion company and still be a victim of ransomware or hacking, simply because of small things like patching. I always like to highlight the fact of a company that was hacked. It was very public. They're called Equifax, and they are a credit reporting agency. A lot of us are familiar with them. And they were hacked for no other reason except for the fact that they didn't patch one of their servers with a known vulnerability for 3 years. And that wasn't because people are incompetent or lazy. It's because with all the resources they have, there's never enough to keep up with these threat actors 24/7, 365, even for the largest organizations. So this was something that slipped by. The team likely had it on their list, and then something else came up, another emergency. 3 years later, it's been forgotten. And again, as I said, a little script running on the internet found that vulnerability and then attacked them. So it was not malicious. It was not fancy. It was not even very sophisticated. It was simply human error, right, that caused that to happen. And so, and a company like that, you would think, has all the resources in the world. So it's not always a matter of money. It's also time.
Yeah, that's true. So on that note, I'm going to share our results. So about 17% of people feel extremely confident about their organization's cybersecurity posture. 7% aren't very confident at all, and most people are in the middle, about 38% of them.
So
okay.
We should talk.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of people see cybersecurity training as very mundane or boring. Do you have any, I guess, tactics on how we can get our staff and our colleagues to actually care about cybersecurity?
Sure. A couple of points around that. So cybersecurity training, agreed, it can be, mundane. You have your own job to do. It can be time consuming. Again, from a cloud career perspective, obviously we provide that type of service, but the way we've approached it is we send you, and cybersecurity is something that has to be ongoing, not something you go to for an hour and you never think about it again. So the way we do it is every month you get essentially roughly a 3-minute video that you watch and answer questions to, along with things like phishing attempts. So simulated phishing attempts where we're trying to see what happens with you and your organization when we send your employees emails. Of course, these aren't real phishing attempts. Nothing bad will happen, but you get instant feedback to say, you clicked on a link that was malicious. Here's why. Here's what to look for. As you mentioned earlier, misspellings, strange language, things of that nature. So one of the keys, it's short and repeatable. So every month you're going to get a little short video that doesn't take up a ton of time and really keeps cybersecurity awareness at top of mind. It's also gamification, right? So you can have rewards to say employee X did all their, they did all of their training this month or this quarter. They get, the gold star or the gift certificate, whatever it might be. a small price to pay for that sort of awareness within the organization. And it makes it fun and interesting as long as the content is engaging, which I think it is. And from a company perspective, it has to be cost effective. You don't want to break the bank trying to train all of your employees because, it just won't be economically feasible. So cost effective, engaging, and informative. Of course, those three things make it very valuable to a corporation and organization.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the repeatable element is also very important to you. The repetition, making sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It becomes second nature, right?
Yes, exactly. So many of us here, we have a culture of sharing a lot of sensitive information, I feel, with other businesses. We may share our passport copies or our credit card details on WhatsApp. Why do you think we have such a lax attitude toward data privacy here? And how can organizations lead the way in changing that behavior?
That's a good question. And I personally think that's not just in the Bahamas. I've seen it elsewhere. But I understand what you're saying. I think, again, it goes back to a little bit of complacency where we think my device is secure. WhatsApp says they encrypt all my data, so that's okay. I'll send all this information through this channel and it should be good. The reality is, if this is a device that's used for corporate work, it should be secured. And you should treat it as, again, another vector into my company's organization. If you have access, let's say, to files on a file server through your phone, whether it's SharePoint or an internal file system or database, you're not vulnerable. WhatsApp may be secure, but your phone itself may not be, right? The application encrypts data between you and I, but someone can be watching keystrokes on your phone as you enter a password, or send someone, I'm an IT administrator. I'm going to send my colleague the password to a server because he's there. I'm not, I want to help. I can't call him. So I'm going to type it into WhatsApp or a text message and send it off. I think that's okay. That's not a big deal. And maybe 95% of the time, nothing happens, but it's just that 1% or 5% of the time that you're opening yourself up to risk when you don't need to.
Yeah,
it's convenience and complacency again, right? To just think it's easy. I'll just get it done.
Yeah. Okay. So if an organization has experienced a breach, how could they work with their local CIRT or perhaps other organizations, perhaps Cloud Carib, other cybersecurity experts to minimize damage and recover efficiently?
Great question. So again, I always think the best defense is a good offense. So start from a position of strength where you've got your backups that are really solid. And again, Cloud Carib does that for many organizations in the Bahamas and beyond. For me, that's always the linchpin is, do I have data secured? So my data secured. So if someone ransomwares my data from today, can I get it back in a secure fashion? If the answer is yes, I'm miles ahead of where I need to be. If the answer is no, and we are, they have my data, it's being ransomwared. The one thing is, can I get up and running again to at least operate the business? Because sometimes they don't just take your data, they might freeze you out of your systems, change passwords, things of that nature. So you're really beholden to them. We can help recover from that so that you can actually run the business. We can remediate the problems because we'll identify how did they actually do this. The third worst step, the last step, is potentially paying them because we need to get our data back. Maybe the backups are corrupt or whatever happened. We don't have the data. And there's a negotiation mechanism between the ransomware entity and yourself. And we actually provide services around that in terms of ransomware negotiation to minimize the impact to you financially. That's something we can also help with. But again, we want to not even get to that point. But if and when that happens, we can help at that point because they're going to start up here for their ransomware demands, and we hopefully get them a little bit lower to minimize the impact. But again, starting from a position of strength is always better than being at their mercy when something happens.
Yes, very true. Okay, so
I think you're muted, Megan.
Can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me okay?
Is it just me? I can't hear you.
Oh no. Can someone else on?
I can hear you, Megan. I can hear you fine. Mark,
Okay.
can you hear me? I think we're having an
Oh,
issue
Megan?
with Mark.
Yeah, I can hear you. Let me just try to send him a message.
Oh, I hear you again. Sorry about that. That must have been me.
Okay. All right. So everyone's favorite topic right now is AI.
Yes.
And it's becoming more popular for employees and businesses to use. How can we balance using AI for productivity with data security?
Again, another great question. AI is the topic of the moment, and it can take many different flavors. The way I see AI, it can be an incredibly useful tool for efficiency in the workplace, but it can also be very dangerous in terms of the data that I want to give these tools, because they are out in the open. You know, if you use ChatGPT, that's running on Amazon services, who knows where, or Microsoft services, somewhere other than your environment. So if I want to ask ChatGPT, how can I create a great schedule for, let's say a planning session, for example? Great. I don't want to give it all of my financial information and say, create a budget for me for fiscal year 2025. I don't want that, because that's out in the open. So it's knowing how to use it and when. It's also, there's a massive security component to it. So again, we've done at Cloud Crib, we're building out localized AI so that you can take advantage of those things. They're called LLMs, large language models, but they're running locally on local infrastructure. So they don't leave the country or even your organization in some cases. So you can get the benefits of that without the security risk. So that's one thing to consider. Also, AI just in general, from a pure security standpoint, it can sift through mountains of data. So way faster than humans can, right? And they don't get tired, they don't make mistakes, they don't miss things. So if you can imagine the volumes of data that organizations get in terms of phishing attacks, firewall attacks, we protect an organization, as an example, in the Bahamas that in the last 30-day period that we measured had 11 million cyber attacks against them. None successful, because we manage it for them, but that's just people trying to get through a firewall. Never mind the internal things we don't see, right? The phishing emails, things of that nature. Just trying to penetrate firewalls to hit their systems. 11 million in a month, in 30 days. So without automation, without AI, to be able to go through those attacks and see where did they come from, it's very daunting. So AI is helping tremendously in that respect. But again, it can be used for very good things, but we have to be careful how much we trust it in terms of what sort of data we give it as well.
11 million sounds frightening.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. So I know we like to lean on AI. Another thing we like to use nowadays are smart devices.
Yes.
Are there any unique security challenges that businesses or consumers should watch out for with the rise of smart devices?
Yes. That's simple. A simple answer is yes. And the reason is that any smart device, or what they call Internet of Things, IoT, it means they're on the internet, they have an IP address, that means they're accessible by outside forces. And think of something like a smart TV. You can get refrigerators that have an IP address now that are on the internet. And a lot of them have cameras. So imagine if you're in a boardroom having a meeting with your board of directors, and unbeknownst to you, that smart TV that you have there for conference calling, that camera's on and recording your conversation. It's proprietary information. It's things you don't want the general public to know. That's another form of hacking that people don't think about, or that fridge that turns on, whatever the capability is. Smart devices, smart routers. We have light posts now that have IoT built into them. So all of those are vectors of attack into an organization that we need to consider. So we need to be very careful in how we deploy these and when we deploy them. Same with your laptop. Again, you have your laptop with a camera that you'll see people sometimes tape over the lens, or put a cover over the lens, because those can be compromised. So people have to think about that, sadly, at every turn.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider, especially as we approach the Christmas shopping season.
Absolutely.
We love boxes and
Yeah.
whoever
Yeah.
else, our loved ones. Okay. Are you able to share insights perhaps from one of the more major cybersecurity breaches you've seen? Some lessons that our local organizations can take away to prevent or respond to incidents?
Sure. I mean, I mentioned Equifax earlier. We remember Sony being hacked and their films being ransomwared a few years ago. So the only thing I would say about organizations being ransomware is, again, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of budget or cost. It's also time and the will of the organization to invest in that area. You know, IT sometimes is an afterthought for us. It's something we need to do, but we don't really want to do it. But if we think about it from protecting our reputation, so reputational damage to an industry or to a corporation, big or small, if I lose my customers' data, I might only have 20 customers, but they're not going to be happy. If I'm offline as an organization, I'm an online business. If I'm down, someone's going to go to another business to get what they need. They're not going to wait for me to recover from an attack. So I don't want to call it quite an insurance policy, but it's essentially ensuring that you can maintain your business going forward. And it's, again, not a matter of, I don't have millions of dollars to spend or billions of dollars. It can be very cost effective to do just the basic things to ensure that you're protected as a business and then you're in turn protecting your customers, whether internal or external, right? Because a corporation might have customer data, but they also have my data, in an HR file somewhere, maybe medical information. So all that stuff is critical to protect. And for me, it's not really optional. It needs to be done as a matter of course. And it's actually a value add to the business versus just another cost center.
Okay. All right. And let's talk a little bit about business continuity plans. So
Yeah.
A lot of businesses think this is something that's optional for them. What are the risks of not having one or not regularly updating one? And then how can small and medium organizations develop this kind of disaster recovery plan as well without breaking the bank?
Yeah, great question. And again, that serves dual purposes, right? If you're ever hacked or ransomware, you have a recovery plan for your data. But even things like a natural disaster, as we know, Bahamas can be subject to things like hurricanes, or even any mundane thing that might take your server down or your systems down. So having a BCP plan, anyone that wants to make sure they can do business in the future should have one. Obviously, we can help with that in terms of planning because it's very daunting, but it just means that if the worst thing happens that I could think of, I can still get back to business. That means my data's elsewhere. Maybe my servers are elsewhere. Cloud Carib has infrastructure in the Bahamas, both in Nassau, Freeport, as well as other islands in the region, Toronto, for example, as well. So that in the worst case scenario, I can get back up and running. If I need to leave the island, or if I have employees that are working elsewhere, they're globally, they can access their data from wherever they are in the world, and therefore they can conduct business. So BCP planning, not an easy thing to do. It could be daunting, but there are experts that can help. I mean, there's ourselves, there's CIRT, of course, that can help. So it's something that we should invest time and effort into for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. So those are all of my pre-planned questions. I'll open the floor for anyone else's questions. You can feel free to raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. I also sent out a prompt, so you're welcome to respond to that or drop your question in the Q&A. But before we started the session, I also got another question. Is there any such thing as online privacy?
Good question. Online privacy, that's a tricky one because you're online. I mean, there's obviously things like you can do, like be anonymous on certain web forums and things of that nature. But anyone that uses Facebook or Instagram for their business, they're really opening themselves up. But you can do things to protect yourself, like make your account private. If you're on Facebook or Instagram or even, let's say, Twitter, anything where you're sharing information, you don't want the world to see everything you're doing necessarily. As a business, maybe it's a little harder, but as an individual, you don't want to just have it open to the world to see pictures of your children or anything of that nature. You want to really restrict that down to the people you really want to see that information. So online privacy is a tricky one from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective, you could do things to keep yourself private by using the features they built into the platforms.
Okay. Okay, so there's a question in the chat. As we all know, AI is a new implementation of IT technology globally and internationally. Will there be any feature of AI technology in cyber technology in the future for the Bahamas?
It's a good question. I think that the way we would apply it in the Bahamas or really anywhere is in an effort to streamline how we process and manage data. So if we're looking for trends, if we're looking to tease out any sort of information that's just hard to find in volumes and volumes of data, whether it's if you're an insurance company looking at actuarial tables to determine what premium should I charge someone for car insurance or medical insurance, house insurance based on where your house is located. There's mountains of data over years and years that a person might take years to do, where AI can likely do in minutes. Things of that nature, right? If there's something like a hospital that's looking at what is the most common incident I'm dealing with, and who should I staff up for? Even within an organization that's doing accounting or any sort of data-driven analysis, you can speed up and streamline how you do things of that nature. From a governmental level, I mean, AI, again, can help with that sort of data to say, what are my citizens looking for most on the government of Bahamas website? What do they really need help with the most? What are my call center stats look like? What are they asking for? So I know how best to allocate my resources to best help the citizenry of my country, right? I don't want to waste money on something no one needs. I want to maximize our dollars to ensure that the outcomes of our citizens are what they actually require to thrive.
Okay. An anonymous attendee is asking, does Cloud Carib help smaller organizations with limited budgets with their cybersecurity?
100%. So what we've done recently, actually, we've decided to, we looked at the data and saw what are we getting requests for the most, and we sort of bundled these things together to make it very affordable. If you think of like a bundle with your provider for TV, internet, cell phone, we've sort of bundled together backups, as I mentioned, which is a bedrock of protecting yourself, and firewall services to ensure that, and actually training as well, to ensure that whatever size you are, you can actually participate in a meaningful way in protecting your organization. And again, happy to talk to anyone about that afterwards. But I think what we put together is very compelling from a price point, anywhere from a few $100s a month to sky's the limit, depending on your budget and what you need. But I think what we've done is created an environment where there's no barrier to entry in terms of cost. And regardless of the price point, you get access to the 24/7 service desk we have. And again, these people are all located here in the Bahamas, and they're servicing our clients. And when I say 24/7, I want to emphasize that means a person, not a voicemail that we'll get back to you later, because things can happen anytime. But yeah, we try to remove that barrier to entry from a cost perspective and provide value with what we do through these bundles. And again, of course, whatever you're paying, you get access to the same people and the same quality of service regardless.
Okay. How is Cloud Carib dealing with the emerging threat of AI-generated deepfakes targeting companies and individuals?
That's a great question. Deepfakes are, I think, going to be an emerging threat, and that's something that, as you develop something, there's always a counter to that, and there is software out there that can recognize a deepfake. Something that I would think that's definitely my grandmother. AI will tell us that's not your grandmother. That's something else. That's an AI generated image and voice, etc. Part of that goes back to training. I mean, you don't want to, on a public profile, especially, have it open to the world. You want to show your kids off to everyone, but maybe not everyone per se, maybe your family and friends, because the more of that kind of data is out there, the more of a target you become. But from a software perspective, yeah, we can help in terms of detecting deepfake threats. It's a very complex issue to solve for, but one of the things we can do again is educate, right? If you get a call from someone that never calls you, or from your father, mother, child asking for money that they don't typically do, it's just a matter of pick up the phone, call that person. Did you call me? Do you need money? Are you hurt? So it's not really a technology solution, but from a just a behavior solution. It's pick up that phone and call that person, and just be aware.
And so I know you mentioned being careful about what you post on social media. You may not need to post your child's photo, but not. So someone's asking on a risk scale of 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, where would you place each social media? So WhatsApp, Messenger, and Facebook regarding cybersecurity.
I think WhatsApp is a big attack vector for exchange of data, because Instagram, you're not going to post, your password or your bank information or your passport, as you mentioned earlier. But WhatsApp, again, I think we get complacent and think it's between me and this other person. So what's the harm? It's encrypted, if I even know it's encrypted. But it's just that can be dangerous in terms of exchange of data. In terms of things like, I think older people like me might use Facebook more than the younger people to post photos of their children, and that's an attack vector. Younger people might be using things like Snapchat or Instagram, and those are obviously their attack vectors because they're very open and they're sharing their location at all times. A lot of, I guess, teens that from what I understand, share their location with their friends at all times of day. And if that gets compromised, you don't know who's following you, who's doing what. I don't want to be a fearmonger, but the reality is that we share information very freely, and maybe we shouldn't. But those, for younger people, I say the attack vectors are those platforms, whereas maybe the older generation, maybe Facebook. That's
Okay.
just me anecdotally speaking, not as an expert of any sort.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I have one more question specifically for you before I invite
Sure.
the rest of the team on the stage, and we'll do a panel and answer some general questions. Which is the strongest, most secure search engine?
Strongest, most secure search engine. That's interesting. Obviously, people use Google as a default. There's a lot of other alternatives people may have heard of or maybe may not have heard of. There's, if you've heard of one called DuckDuckGo, that's actually fairly popular and I believe more secure, more accurate information returned to you. But it's not perfect, but if you want to use a search engine in incognito mode per se, that might be helpful. But the reality is you're, again, giving another organization, not your data, but your query, right? They're going to obviously take your question and analyze it because they're going to give you answers to it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I have another question for the group. I think I will pose this question to Erica, our policy and compliance officer. Erica, can you tell us a little bit about the agreement you may enter between the user and the enterprise that owns the service or application? Can you tell us a bit about what that's called or what it does?
Okay, just to make sure that I am covering all bases, you have agreements or policies that are internal to organizations that may be on a laptop owned by the organization. For example, something that says that the system is owned by XYZ Corporation. Anything you do in it is not private or personal. And these kind of policies are made known to the user, and they would have to sign some attestation form that they agree to the policy. But when you're talking about an organization and an entity external to the organization that provides a service, then you might have an end user agreement or you might have a service level agreement.
Thank you so much. I have another question. This is a good one for Sumitria, our CERT director. Sumitria, is it expected that organizations will share with CERT attack attempts that they observe on their network? Sumitria, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Dr. Etienne, moving my hand to say, we want you to report incidents. I'm also aware that we care about understanding our overall posture. So we want to know trends on attacks. So you can certainly report those. Ideally, we have a categorization of incidents and how we will respond to those incidents, and you will find that on our website. However, ideally, we want you to communicate your incidents to us.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot again, Sumitra. Someone is asking if we are hiring.
We are hiring. Let's rephrase that. So yes, I don't want to be funny. We are hiring. We do have vacant positions in the CIRT. And we're working through that procurement process. So if you have applied or you're thinking of applying, please come. We would love to have you join our team.
Thank you. Okay, there's another question. Cybersecurity has its significant and independent regulations legislations. What role would you suggest IRCA ought to have in the fight to create a robust cyber reef? Sumitra, I'll give you this question as well.
So I consider IRCA is a regulatory body, and IRCA is also a critical information infrastructure. So one of the things that I mentioned before is, one, identifying those critical infrastructure, as well as being partners with them so that they can support the initiative. So, and a good example of this is in future, as we develop frameworks and guidelines to help critical infrastructure agency be more secure, IRCA being a regulatory body for telecommunication can help enforce those initiatives. That's just one way. But IRCA is certainly a partner to us. So we would want to share information, collaborate on initiatives like cybersecurity strategy implementation, the needs, what we're seeing in that particular sector, how do we advance the cybersecurity posture of that sector. So using IRCA to push the initiative of advancing cybersecurity, ideally within the telecommunication sector, locally, and then of course, regionally and internationally.
Thank you. I'm going to give this question to Mark. What are some ways we can incorporate information security in the warehouse and logistics industry?
That's a good question. And I would think that in the warehouse and logistics industry, from what I've seen in my experience, there are a lot of unsecured access points. So in terms of, let's say, a computer on a cart that's used to be wheeled around to do certain things, scan items in a warehouse, for inventory purposes. Those are the type of systems that sort of fall through the cracks when it's time to, let's say, update systems from a software perspective, and they're vulnerable. They might be on the internet or they might not be on the internet, but attached to corporate systems, right? You're feeding data back into a database. So that's an entry point. You might have cameras at the perimeter for security purposes, and those cameras are internet connected. And again, they're an attack vector. There was an incident, I believe a couple of years ago, where a bunch of security cameras were actually infected with malware. And that's not a good thing. So we need to be aware of, again, all those entry points. There are a lot of commonalities, but in that particular instance, yeah, I think it can sometimes be overlooked, and you have a ton of data, especially from a ransomware perspective. If you get ransomware and lose your data, that's very critical. That's a major issue, right?
Okay. Thank you. I'll give this question to Militia. What are some of the best ways to identify scams on the internet or social media?
Okay, well, we realize that you must remain vigilant. Now, everyone knows, we know that social engineering remains one of the strongest tactics and ways that criminals carry out their attacks and the scams. And as people, the attackers appeal to persons. to people. Even though we have the technology, we know to get these attacks, to be successful in the attacks, it's important to appeal to the people. So we have to be mindful of these social engineering tactics, and we can see it through, and the attackers are becoming very, very creative in the way they pose their attacks. And it comes through calls. Before time, you never used to see the attacks come through calls. Some of these strange 20-digit numbers sometimes, through text messages. If you're not expecting certain text, if it's strange, and it doesn't feel right, then it probably isn't. We see it more prevalent now, more through phishing in the emails. We find that when you see them requesting certain sensitive information, that is a red flag. And so you want to remain vigilant about what type of information that you're given. I think Mark mentioned a lot of what we do on social media. We tend to, disclose so much personal information. You don't leave anything to the imagination of the attacker. And so we have to be mindful of that. We have fake sites, and sometimes it's not even intentional. You might be just browsing a site, or even in like I said, the phishing emails, they have links in them where you're thinking it's a legitimate, site, and it's just a matter of a letter being off, or, a number being off. And so we must remain vigilant in that. If there's unexpected emails, pay attention. So we just need to pay attention. I think the biggest thing is awareness. I think there's a need to really push this awareness that people need to be mindful of all the different ways. And it seems like every so often it's just new ways. I know it's hard to keep up sometimes, but what we know is, okay, through the emails, through your calls, through the text message, through going to certain sites. And mentioned, Megan, you also mentioned some of the information that we sent out during Awareness Month, updating your software. So make sure that you have these things in mind, implemented in order to keep yourself, safe.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes. Okay, I have another question. How does CIRT address security issues that Bahamian internet service providers face, such as emails from Bahamian servers being sent to spam? I guess I'll give that one to Sumitra. You look like you want to answer that.
Well, I was assuming that you were sending this question my way. You're asking us, how do we address issues related with concerns related to ISPs? And the way we address this currently is that we're communicating with those ISPs. We will share with them the potential risk or the threat that we see. So we have advisories. They're also constituents of ours. And the goal is to work with them to work through this. So when we see things like blacklistings and that you're alluding to, we will make that information available to the ISP involved, engage with them, work with them to remediate that issue. So the goal here, as always, and I've constantly been saying, is that it's just how we collaborate and communicate in order to push our agenda.
Okay, thank you. And I'll let anyone answer this question. What's the difference between information security and cybersecurity? Is there any difference? We hear both terms all the time.
I think nowadays, I'm old enough, or I've been in this field long enough to remember when it was information security and not cybersecurity, right? Nowadays, we use information security and cybersecurity interchangeably. But if we're talking about the definition of information security handles the hold of information, all information, so not only digital information. Whereas in cybersecurity deals with the protection of the housing and the transmission of digital information. So that's where you get the difference between information security and cybersecurity. But what I've seen in the industry, that we are not making a distinction between information security and cybersecurity, because ideally we're moving in a space where most information is digital information. So you're seeing that used interchangeably, kind of across the board. So there is a difference, a small difference, in that cybersecurity is a subset of information security. But when you hear it used now, you can assume that includes information security as a whole.
Thank you. Okay, I'll pose this question to Mark. My organization is tasked with monitoring and reporting on government finances. What specific cybersecurity threats should we be particularly aware of, and what proactive steps can we take to safeguard sensitive financial data from emerging threats in the future?
Good question. So if you're sharing financial information with anyone, especially government, you should obviously ensure that the intended recipient is correct. We mentioned earlier, you can make a typo in an email address as well and send it to the wrong person. I've seen that happen personally. Maybe not with that kind of information, but it can happen. Or I've received information, that wasn't intended for me. So be very careful who you're sending information to. First of all, ensure if at all possible, it's sent in an encrypted fashion, not just through plain text. Don't text them with email. Don't use WhatsApp, as we talked earlier. Most email communication can be compromised. But what you can do is, what we've done typically is we set up a secure site for someone to download a document. We'll send them an email. We'll send them a passcode through it, like a one-time passcode through a text message or something of that nature, where they can retrieve it on their device, so you know it's them, and then they can use that to access the file, and only that file. So don't give them access to the entire repository of your data, but just that, only what is required to complete the task. So those are some things you can do to take care of that. There's obviously things you can do like VPNs and things of that nature, but I think just ensuring who you're sending data to, and again, not being overly complacent is a good way to start.
Thank you. Okay. And someone else is asking Mark, what steps can I take to become more aware of cybersecurity procedures and practices, perhaps online resources or something?
Online resources. Again, I think what CIRT talked about doing is really powerful. They're creating a community within the Bahamas. You can get together with peers and discuss challenges you're facing, because likely you're not the only one. And yeah, the great thing about today's world, outside of all the security incidents we need to deal with, is there is a plethora of information that you can access to educate yourself, whether it's a YouTube video or even on a vendor site where you can look at what are the latest trends or what are the latest things you need to look out for. And you can leverage partners like CIRT, like ourselves, to do things like keep yourself up to date from a patching perspective or security perspective, a firewall, anything, right? To really enhance your posture without, breaking the bank, to use a simple term.
Okay, thank you. We've got about 2 or 3 more questions. What cybersecurity vulnerabilities have you seen in libraries in the Caribbean, and how can we guard our national libraries here in the Bahamas? This question is open for anyone to answer.
Could I say something about that, if possible?
Of course.
So I currently live in Toronto, Canada, and our library system was hacked months and months and months and months ago, and they haven't recovered yet. So this speaks to the fact that money and size don't always matter. So we are still recovering from this hack that brought down all of the library systems I believe it's the entire city of Toronto, 6 million people, hundreds of libraries. So that's very impactful. And again, what is the reason for that? Who knows? Information, disruption, malicious behavior, telling the city, pay us or you don't get your data back. And the data, again, is only valuable to the City of Toronto library system, right? No one else cares about that data. You're not going to sell it to a rival library corporation. It's just of importance to them. Reputationally, it's very bad. People get library cards. They go and scan in their card. It might have your home address, things of that nature. Your children likely have library cards with their information, where they live, maybe where they go to school. So it's never a good thing, but I just wanted to bring that up to say that it's not a matter of size. It's just a matter of will. We have CTOs that run the City of Toronto Library and things of that nature. It still happened. For whatever reason, we don't know. We may never know because they don't tend to disclose that. But that's something that we need to be cognizant of, and why it happened. Likely they have many, many connected laptops and desktops people use there, and they just don't get patched properly. It's probably as simple as that someone's running Windows, 2010 on a desktop somewhere, and someone came in and maliciously hacked it, and they're all connected. So we always have to be mindful of that thing. So that's my anecdote, personal experience witnessing it as a citizen living here. Sorry, I didn't want to hijack the conversation, but
No, not at all. Thank you so much for that insight. Okay. And I'll pose this question to either our director or our policy and compliance officer. Where does CIRT fit into a present business continuity plan? Either Sumitra or Erica can take that. Sumitra, you're muted.
So thank you so much for that question. I was talking about business continuity as a way of building resilience. So one of the things that you should know is if you were to have a disruption and you want to recover from that disruption, there's a lot that goes into understanding what your business needs in order to be able to recover in a good way. So you need to know your critical assets. You need to know the value of the assets you hold. You need to know how quick you need to respond to your clients. And all of those types of things are a part of your business continuity plan. And then, of course, you may have a disaster recovery plan. I'm assuming you have that. But your plan, including your incident response plan, should include contacting the CIRT as a part of business continuity, especially if you have a crisis and you need the support of the CIRT to help you recover. So that's one. The other thing that the CIRT offers is support on things like education. So we don't know every company in the Bahamas, every institution in the Bahamas, but we do have a wealth of knowledge that we can support and share with you on how to develop business continuity plans. So that's where Erica come in, providing training on that for you. So those are some of the initiatives we hope to move into, so that as you are working through a possible incident or a possible disruption to your organization, you are prepared, you have workarounds and backup plans to help you with continuing your business throughout an incident.
Thank you. Okay. With new cybersecurity trends continuously emerging, what are the biggest cybersecurity risks that organizations face today, and what safeguards can be implemented for prevention? Anyone can take that.
So I like to think, I'm going to tell you my personal opinion on biggest cybersecurity risk. I think it is persistence, advanced persistence, as well as it is the evolution of threats and the sophistication of these threats happening as a result of evolving technology like AI. So that's kind of the threat landscape. But if I'm pulling back and using my CISO hat, I think a lot of it is centered around education and mainly situational awareness, not understanding your posture in order for you to understand your threats and build in cyber risk management within your program. Cybersecurity is an important risk for businesses, and it should be identified, it should be discussed, and ultimately it should be managed as a part of every business. I think what's happening, and I hope that the shift is happening within the culture, is that organizations and people are being aware so that we are putting controls in place to respond to cyber risk. So if there's ever an issue that I want to say, what is the biggest? is the lack of awareness that would allow us to have appropriate action to respond to cyber. My goal or my hope is that that gap is improved, and not just in the Bahamas, but also regionally. And you see it at every level. You see it at leadership level. How are leaders responding to cybersecurity? Do they have an understanding of the posture of the country? You see it at the organizational level, whether or not there's tune at the top, and whether or not organization has a cybersecurity culture where cybersecurity risks built into their business. And then you see it at the department level. What's happening there? Do you have policies and procedures, and your operations are supported by sound cybersecurity practices? And moving right down to the individual level, where are we practicing sound cybersecurity hygiene? Do we understand how to appropriately respond to cyber risk? If we're talking about what's impacting it, yes, technology is a big part. Processes certainly is a big part. But I think the largest element is how human treats with cybersecurity risk.
Thank you so much. Last question that we'll take. Based on your experience, do many local entities use penetration testing and other red team engagement to help locate their vulnerabilities and harden their systems?
Is that question for me?
Sure.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I was just wondering if it was for me.
It is okay, but you can take it.
I'm going to pull this information again from our assessments that we've done nationally on technology and the use of technology. What we found is that no. So we have larger organization that has enterprise risk management where cybersecurity is included. We do see that, right? So you see it mainly in the financial sector, other larger organizations, some of your ISPs and some critical information organizations. So you would see that. But small to medium-sized business, we don't see that a lot, simply because I think it's associated with cost. I think it's also associated with lack of awareness and maturity within the cybersecurity program. And if that is happening, it is happening at an ad hoc space. So the maturity is, it's sometimes they do it, but they don't do it all the time. It's not a requirement. What that is linked to, and I spoke about this recently, is that in some of these medium to small businesses, there's no ownership for cybersecurity. So you may have the one or two IT professional who's wearing many, many, many hats. And as a result, you don't see that translate to a comprehensive cybersecurity program. And then, like I said, cost can certainly be a factor in being able to procure things like pen testing.
Okay.
I
Well,
would concur with that. Sorry to jump in there, but I'd concur with that sentiment that people think it's very expensive to do, or they do it sporadically. So that's an important point to note, that it's I don't think it's a nice to have. It's likely a must have for a lot of organizations, so they know where they stand.
I'd also like to add that for most organizations, it's probably also a reaction rather than a proactive measure.
Mhm.
thank you so much. I'd like to, being time conscious, I'd like to close the Q&A now. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to Cloud, Carib. Thank you to Mark, Aruda, and Olivia and Mikkel for coordinating this engaging segment for us today. I will allow Sumitria to give some closing remarks. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Sumitria.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll start by saying thank you all for attending our cybersecurity awareness webinar, but more importantly, thank you all for participating in all of the cybersecurity awareness activities that we conducted throughout this month. We are hoping to hear from you. You are part of our tribal group. You are part of our tribe, And the goal here is to work with you to build a stronger and safer Bahamas. Feel free to call on us at the CIRT. Join our newsletter so that you can hear activities. You can have access to our advisory. Also, check out our website. Look forward and participate in some of the events we are having upcoming that I mentioned before. We're needing you. This work cannot be done without your participation. And like I said, the goal is to build shared national resilience. Thank you so much all for coming. Thank you to the team, CIRT-BS team, Megan for spearheading this, all the members of the team who participated throughout the month. We've done a whole host of things. We will continue to work with you and provide information to you and services to you. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.